Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7 o'clock. Let's call this meeting to order for the P&Z for Thursday, November 13th, 2008. Would you join me with the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excluding the planners. Let's see. The first thing we have is approval of minutes for September 30th, 2008, the EAR Public Workshop. Do I have any changes, or do I have a motion to accept as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Part 2, or B, is the minutes for September 23rd, 2008. Do you have any changes or any additions, or do I have a motion to accept as presented?
That's October 23rd.
October 23rd. You're good.
So moved.
And a second? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you. We have an item that's not on the consent agenda, the shops at Vero Beach. Does anybody like to pull that? We'd like.
It's not on consent.
Excuse me. Yeah. You would like to pull it?
No.
No? Nobody?
Well,
It's not
on consent, so it will be discussed.
Oh, wake up, Craig. Okay. Shops at Vero Beach request for a major site plan and preliminary plat approval for a shopping center to be known as the Shops at Vero Beach. RM Tryon Shops, Vero Beach owner. DeGallio Associates Incorporated agent, located at the north side of State Road 60, east of 90th Avenue and south of Paradise Park. Zoning classification CG, general commercial. Land use designation CI, commercial industrial. SP/MA 0810-370/2004050025-62230 quasi-judicial. If anybody is going to be heard on this issue, we'll have to ask you to please stand and be sworn by the clerk.
Do you swear or tell the truth? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
John, are you the lucky guy?
Yes, I am.
Go for it.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chairman Fletcher. John McCoy with the Planning Department. And this is a request by the Shops at Vero for major site plan and preliminary plat approval. They're actually going to plat over the site plan that they're proposing, which will create a commercial tract, the 2 out parcels, and a variety of easements. The site is located at the northeast corner of 90th Avenue and State Road 60. It's zoned general commercial. You can see the zoning on the map. It's limited commercial to the east, single-family residential to the north, general commercial across 90th Avenue to the west, and across State Road 60 to the south is also general commercial. The aerial shows the surrounding development as it is today. To the east is a hotel. To the north are single-family homes. Some of the lots are developed, some of the lots are not. Again, across 90th Avenue to the west, it's vacant commercial property with the exception of a small developed parcel in the southwest corner. And then again, across State Road 60 to the south is the truck stop, which is also general commercial and presently undergoing renovations.
Big time renovations.
The next slide shows the site plan for the Shops at Vero. It's a 24-acre site. Over 40% of the site is in open space. The center proposes a shopping center, which is anchored by a Kohl's, and then a retail shopping center and 2 out parcels. And those are the 2 out parcels that will be created, are the 2 adjacent to State Road 60. As far as traffic circulation for the site goes, there'll be 4 driveways for the site. 1 on State Road 60. That'll be limited to a right-in, right-out. It will have a right turn lane for that driveway. There'll be 3 driveways on 90th Avenue. The southern and the central driveways will have right turn ins. Those will be full movement driveways. And then the very northern driveway will be essentially a service drive to access the rear of the center. There is also a southbound left turn lane on 90th Avenue at State Road 60 required. And then the other items I've illustrated there are the interconnections with the commercial property to the west, such as when the hotel would redevelop, those interconnections would actually be made. And then there's an undeveloped out parcel that's not included with the center in the southwest corner of the shopping centers. And when that site developed, those interconnections would be made at those points. And there could likely be a third point, essentially behind one of those out parcels that's also stubbed out depending upon the design that the applicant comes in with on the out parcel. Other required improvements include sidewalks along State Road 60 and 90th Avenue, and those will be either built or bonded. Those need to be built prior to a CO or bonded. This application generally complies with the State Road 60 corridor, and we gave you all a lot of information in your packet as far as architecturals and things along those lines, foundation plantings, the sign, the landscaping. So with just a couple of minor conditions, it will meet the State Road 60 corridor plan. The applicant will be required to pave 90th Avenue. That'll be part of a developer's agreement. It looks like right now that they'll pave up to at least 22nd Street and maybe beyond that. That developer's agreement would need to be approved prior to them getting what's called site plan release and construction authorization, and then the improvement would need to be complete prior to a CO or as determined by the developer's agreement. The other item I'd like to touch on is right-of-way for 90th Avenue. Right now there's a Murphy Act over this property's 90th Avenue frontage. And the Murphy Act is more than the county needs for the ultimate right-of-way and extends into what the applicant's proposing to use for part of the landscape, parking, and actually building area. So the county would retain what is needed for the ultimate right-of-way, and we would end up releasing what is essentially more than the ultimate right-of-way that the applicant needs, and that release would need to occur, again, prior to site plan release, so we can make sure that before they go to construction that that property is unencumbered. And then lastly, I'd like to note that concurrency for this site is vested so that that all the trips are already in the system and that the site is vested for concurrency. Next, I'd like to talk about drainage. This site will have a combination dry and wet retention pond as required by St. John's or system, and it'll collect the runoff with a series of underground pipes, take it to the retention system. Once it's treated, it will then outfall to a canal on the south side of State Road 60 through a pipe. Environmental factors, this site is wooded. It was not previously a grove, as so many sites we deal with, so it's more environmentally sensitive than a lot of the sites we deal with. There are two wetlands on the site. The applicant's proposing to impact one, and that's on the western portion. Again, it's a small isolated wetland on the western side of the site, and preserve the one on the eastern side of the site, and also preserve the native upland habitat. And one of the items I'd like to point out to you is clarify something in the staff report. On page 3 in the staff report, I said that there's 3.34 acres that are going to become conservation area, and if you add the figures, that's what it totals. What's happened is a portion of that area where the mitigation is going to occur is already publicly owned, so that area won't become a conservation area. It essentially already is, but it's part of that area needs enhancement, and that's what the applicant's going to do as part of their mitigation for upland. So it's only 2.42 acres that'll become conservation area or easement through this. The other portion is actually enhancement of already publicly owned property. So I wanted to explain that. Tree mitigation also came into play here because there are a number of specimen trees being removed. All of the tree mitigation will occur on site as part of the landscape plan. They're not getting credit for those as landscape trees, but it's the 74-inch oaks will be planted as part of the mitigation, and again, that is shown on the landscape plan. I'm not given credit for it. Some of the items I'd like to touch on the landscape plan, though, is it does meet the State Road 60 corridor criteria for the State Road 60 buffer, the foundation plantings, and a type B buffer is required for the north property line because of the residential area to the north. Now, if you look at the site plan, between the edge of the parking lot and the north property line, that's over 240 feet. So there's a lot of distance there. And what the applicant is proposing to do is preserve native vegetation to fulfill that 6-foot opaque feature. And where native vegetation is not sufficient, supplement. So it'll be 100% vegetation to create that 6-foot opaque feature. There's not a wall or a berm or anything because, again, the berm would require the removal of additional vegetation. So they're trying to do it entirely with vegetation, preserve the existing, and then supplement to meet that 6-foot opaque feature. With that, I'd like to get to the recommendation, and staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant approval with the conditions as outlined in the staff report. Thank you.
Any questions of staff?
I have some. John, can you show me that conservation I'm sorry. Can you show me that conservation easement? I'm curious.
It's not that well illustrated on this colorized site plan, but essentially it takes in this wetland, takes in some of the area, bridges up over, and then comes back down and takes in the native upland area here that's being preserved.
So all that's going to stay in its, well, the top left is going to stay in its natural, the way it is now?
That's correct. The only thing that would occur there would be exotics removal.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from staff?
John, have you had any comments from the public, anyone north of this, concerning the lack of a berm or anything? I think that's a great plan to have on that northern boundary, have natural vegetation instead of creating berms, etc.
We haven't had any input from the residents to the north. I got one call very early on in the process when they were surveying, and the surveyor stakes had appeared, and they were asking what was going on, but that was more of an informational call than a call as to what.
Sure, Donna?
One other question, John. Approximately a little over half an acre is going to be dedicated from the site for the 90th Avenue right-of-way. Is that dedicated with or without compensation?
It's without compensation, and that's the part of the site that's also subject to the Murphy Act. So it's already got that Murphy Act easement over it. So it's something that's going to come without compensation.
John, you want to explain the Murphy Act shortly just for the public? We've mentioned it so much on this issue. So.
Yes. It's an act by the state government that during post-Depression era time frame, that when property was taken back by the state for failure to pay taxes, the state would retain an easement once it was essentially sold back to private interest for future road rights-of-ways. And that easement was retained typically 100 feet from the center line of any state road at the time.
Existing state road, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Oh, John, what portion of this was already public property? You said it was...
This was not, but they're going to do mitigation off-site.
Off-site,
so
on
the off-site
public, okay.
mitigation will be on public property.
Didn't understand.
Already owned.
Yeah, where? You tell us where that is?
Right now what's being contemplated is Captain Forester Preserve, where there is some area that was previously grove, and they would be essentially converting that.
And
Basically cleaning it up.
Cleaning it up and taking it from what was grove and transitioning it into a couple of different habitat types, I think as more public illustration type purposes, as a public exhibit.
Great. Any other questions from the board?
Well, I have the same concern about the north end there. Those houses are pretty close to that property with that setback without a berm there. I mean, if these people later on determine that they're unhappy, would they put more landscaping in?
The plan would be what the plan is approved, and right now, along that north perimeter from the west property line to about the east end of the pond, there's a 4-foot black vinyl chain link fence, and then the rest of it is all vegetation to make that 6-foot opaque feature. If there's a performance standard where the 6-foot opaque feature is not met, we can go back and have them enhance that. Correct. Okay. But once that 6-foot opaque feature is met, we can't arbitrarily say you need to add more landscape.
Or you can do it at the beginning?
We can do it throughout the process, even 4 or 5 years down the road, if the 6-foot opaque feature fails, but that's our performance standard, where
Because it looks like those houses are, close to the property line anyway.
correct, the houses are built fairly close to their property.
Right.
You jump in whenever you get a chance.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just for the record, Stan Bowling, Planning Director. John, I don't think that the illustration got up on the screen just a moment ago, but could you just point out where the walls are going to be by the loading docks?
Correct. There is a requirement for loading docks to be screened, and that's with an 8-foot wall, and not within the landscaped area, but immediately on the back side. These would be loading docks. What you would see here would be the tractor trailers backed into the truck well, and then there would be a wall at this point, and then also there is a loading bay. That's not shown as well here, but there is a single loading bay, loading dock here, and then a wall also that screens this one immediately adjacent to the loading bay to contain those loading activities.
I just wanted to point that out. That's separate from an issue of berm or no berm along the back, that the loading docks will be
Screened.
and with an 8-foot wall.
Does the county...
That's 200 or 300 feet, isn't it?
Oh, at least
Yes,
200.
yeah, the setback is
And then you're gonna
pretty
aim-
significant.
And then you're going to...
In addition.
They'll actually increase the vegetation on the very northern edge,
Correct.
and basically you really aren't going to see through there that well.
That's correct. Native vegetation and distance is the main thing, and then the loading docks have their own wall for noise and aesthetics.
Stan, do we have, we the county, have a ordinance covering storage in tractor trailer? The city of Vero Beach does, I know, because these stores like to, during the season, park the truck there and use it as storage for the season. Do we have anything like that for the county?
We've had, that does occur in some, it tends to actually occur, we've found, with older department stores that didn't have as large a space for layaway and that sort of thing. For really recent projects, we haven't had that issue. We had the issue at Walmart before they became a superstore, got larger area, but we haven't had that issue. And in this particular layout, there's really no room. They don't have extra room to do that anyway. So I don't see that as being an issue on this site.
That was a good dance, but didn't answer the question.
I think we do have an ordinance that
No,
precludes the use of a trailer for storage.
Correct. What we have here on this site, let me be a little more direct. There are no areas designated here for to store a trailer. They've got the loading dock area, and then they have vehicle spaces here. So they don't have any place that's designated on their site plan that would allow them,
Great.
other than just to sit there for a short period of time for deliveries, if they had that
Great.
situation.
It's just been an issue in the past. I want to make sure we all understood it didn't happen. Would the owner/builder/ like to make a presentation? No? This is a public hearing, so would anybody from the public like to comment? Please come up. Oh, come on. I see questions on all those faces there. Going, chance going. Close the public hearings. Any more comments?
I wonder if I could show a diagram on the set. Would that be all right?
Everything's negotiable. Well, most everything. I saw Bruce get nervous out there. These slide technology guys.
Yeah.
Thumb drives are great, aren't they?
It's a photo of a slide, if you can get it into the computer. What we have before us, the tree
Right.
section. And I'll just bring it up because I'm really pleased that you're putting the maps of the trees and the surveys of the trees on these applications now. You can see what they are. I notice, I'll just review where some of these oak trees are in the project here. I count up about 19 oak trees that you have listed.
Go ahead. Go get it up in a minute. Go ahead and explain here.
And I believe all of them are going to be removed. Is that right?
The way I understand it.
I'm not sure about the exact number. The mitigation trees worked out to 70.
If you can, do I need to help you? It's in, probably in the G
It's low.
directory.
But yeah, it's initialized.
I have circled them on the map there, and that's the reason I
Go ahead with
wanted
your
to bring
point,
it up.
though. Your concern is,
Well, they are actually clustered together in about two areas. And that's why the reason I wanted the map up there.
okay, we're working the problem.
I guess I should have handed this in earlier.
Screaming right along the speed of dark.
It would be all right. It could be under the,
You want to go help him?
no.
Go down there.
Overhead? No, on the overhead. We could.
These guys are good. Magic.
Okay.
Magic. There it is.
Right. And I pointed out, one of the things is the wetlands to the west, and that's going to be made into a dry reservoir,
Dry retention.
a retention area. And I was wondering why we need to have a dry retention area when you have a nice wetlands there already.
I'm going to let the client talk to a little bit about that, but first I'd just like to point out it gets into competing interests, and mostly it's the St. John's criteria, with the St. John's trying to reduce phosphate loading and having a requirement for a dry retention area. By the time you get a dry and a wet retention area in the dual purpose, that I believe that's the reason the client ended up with.
Would the client like to respond? Please come forward. Let me have your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Brian DiGirolamo, the civil engineer on the project, DiGirolamo Associates in Coral Springs.
Good evening, Brian.
The site is designed, as was stated, with a combination dry retention area. Stormwater will flow initially into the dry retention area in the northwest quadrant of the site. It'll fill up there before it then overflows into the wet retention area, and then eventually makes its way to the south and outfalls into the DOT canal. The purpose of the dry retention is to percolate water into the groundwater through the bottom. You don't get that same performance with a wetland. You've got different soils underneath there, which will prevent that. The size is not the same, and the performance, it will not meet the phosphate performance criteria by the district.
It seems, well, I don't want to argue with St. John's if that's the requirement, but it seems to me it would be more practical to have a wetlands, a natural wetlands there, receiving some of this material to begin with.
Well, there's also a grading issue, too. The grades at the wetland are not the same. The dry retention has to be at a prescribed elevation relative to the water
which
table.
is deeper?
The dry retention is deeper. Its bottom is 1 foot above the water table at 21.5. It's got a much greater volume to serve the needs of the project.
Okay. If we could look at the other map that I had, which is basically your drawing, and I have circled the oak trees, and they're clustered together in two areas. One in the center, I don't know if you can point that out, right in there. There's about six of the oak trees that you have listed are found there. And then as you go south, about where that bank is supposedly going to be located in the parking lot there is another area with about 6 oak trees. So within this whole 24-acre lot, there's 2 really concentrated areas where these live oaks are found. And I would hope that we could find some design that would sort of preserve those, because that would be 2/3 of the major oak trees in the proposal. If you look also, if you would, just on a computer you could flip the design that you have here, except for the gas station there on the corner of 90th and State Road 60. If you would switch those around, and you're going to give up that west wetlands anyway, you could probably think about saving, 2/3 of the oaks in that. I mean, how many? Did you count all the trees?
I've counted them, yes.
There's almost 200 trees there, right?
Right, with the survey, I mean, it makes it easy.
And these are the trees that are above. These are the trees above 10 inches. They aren't locating the other trees. So if you look up where they want to put the Track 1 upland preserve, there's really no special trees there. What do we call these trees? Specimen trees.
Specimen trees, the 13 and over.
So there's no specimen trees up in that corner. And so what we're doing is that we're sacrificing the specimen trees for the project and then opening up the areas where there's no specimen trees for the mitigation. It seems kind of reverse to me. I don't have a problem with the development, but I would think that there should be a way that we could go in and preserve out of these 200 trees, specimen trees, nearly 200.
Well, I don't think 200 are specimen. It's 13 and over for the specimen trees, as I remember. It was a smaller number. That's the actual specimen.
And some of these trees are not specimen.
Correct. They don't quite meet that criteria.
Well, they're close enough to get listed.
We have all the protected trees listed over 4 inches in diameter because that's what it requires a permit to take them out. But there's a range there from the protected to the specimen that are just protected trees that don't require mitigation.
So, I mean, I think that we ought to try to save at least one oak tree out of this, out of this 25-acre lot. There ought to be some space for, and I think the neat thing about the oak trees in this particular area, which is a natural area, it's not a grove. We're talking about, something that was there at the beginning of time.
Out there.
They've lasted all these years. With a little bit of insight, I would think that we could save at least 2/3 of the oak trees. Now, the cabbage palms that you have there, they can be moved around quite easily. And the oak trees can be moved around, too. It just takes about 6 months or to a year of work and a good expense. So I would think it might be worthwhile in the terms of so many trees there to think about changing the design a little bit. And I don't think it needs to be changed a lot just to save those particular trees.
Well, they're not going to, there's going to be mitigation that's going to make room elsewhere for these same trees. They're not killing these trees. The mitigation would be, when they take these trees out, the mitigation, as I understand it, correct, Bob, will account for these trees. It'll be just somewhere else.
No, they're doubling the size. They're killing the trees. They're removing them.
John, how are we on the parking?
There are 10 spaces.
We're 10 spaces over on the parking,
It doesn't give us much flexibility then.
Right, so it really doesn't. And people before have had a similar concern to Dr. Baker's, and again, it's if the trees were more evenly distributed over the site and it wasn't their nature to grow in a hammock-type environment, it would be easier. It happens to be that it's more concentrated towards the center. But and that's why we have the mitigation rule on the books, is folks have had this concern in the past and realize that when you get a commercially developed site, it's an intensely developed site and it can't always be designed. And I'll turn it over to the applicant here in a minute and they can talk about their design and what would it be entailed in a redesign. But as far as the mitigation requirement was put in exactly for this reason, when we realize that you can't always essentially design yourself out of or into a solution or out of a problem, that the mitigation trees would go into the preserve area. Some of them would go into the preserve area, not all of them. Some of them would go into buffer, some of them would go along the west property line.
But that where there is no vegetation or no growth now at the mitigation site will become oak trees. That's the good part.
If you're a fan of mitigation and you think that that's the salvation of our plant, well, that's not the point. The point is that it's the law.
John,
whether we like it or not, that's the mode that the state, county, and municipalities have to follow.
John, then you did have the conversation with the owner concerning Dr. Baker's concerns, and what were the problems that you saw if they tried to do something like Dr. Baker is suggesting?
I was going to let the applicant address it because early on, our environmental group did have those conversations with the applicant. I wasn't in close coordination with him at that point.
Does the applicant have someone they'd like to do a dance for us?
But as far as the design goes, there's both the elevation grade change issue and then again the concentration as far as the...
Good evening, sir. Would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Good evening. Barney Lombardi, LM Development, 6051 North University Drive, Davie, Florida.
Good evening.
Good evening. And Dr. Baker, I very much appreciate the comments and the concern about the trees, and we would love to be able to do whatever is possible to conserve them. We did look at that initially, and unfortunately the reality of developing a site such as this, a commercial property, frontage on 60th, obviously the trees grew where they wanted to grow, and one of the biggest factors in the economics of the project, of course, are the out parcels. You could, I don't know if we can get that back up on the screen or not.
Sure.
Site plan. The main cluster.
Do you want the site plan from the
well, that'll
Dr.
do for now.
Baker's, or would you like to?
The main cluster that's at the east edge of the property is located in the bank out parcel, as I think you pointed out originally. If you now can get to the site plan.
All hands stand by to stand by. You did that the last time, Bob. There we go.
There's a number of design criteria that we're faced with. You can see that our entry off of 60th has somewhat of an S-curve in it. We have very little flexibility as to the location of that within, I would say, maybe 15 or 20 feet. So, in essence, we have to have our entry there to meet the minimum requirements as far as adjacent road, adjacent driveways, etc. So that kind of cordons off the area that's available for an out parcel on that side. If you could overlay those oak trees on here, you would probably find that they pretty much fall on the eastern portion of that bank out parcel building. The other thing that you have to concern yourself with in that, in trying to conserve something that's existing, is the elevation of the existing ground and the required elevation to construct the site to meet all the drainage requirements. Literally, if we were to try to preserve that cluster of oak trees, we would have to have such an expansive area around them that you could probably see that particular site would be relatively not undevelopable maybe, but certainly not developable to the extent that could warrant the economics that are involved in that particular out parcel. It would probably render that out parcel very unmarketable. And I shouldn't say probably, I know it would, because we looked at trying to manipulate whatever we could there, and there just wasn't the room to do it. Of course, the obvious is, from an economic standpoint, is, as a parent, the site, when you have the drainage requirements, when you have the upland preserve areas that you're trying to preserve and to meet, the site pretty well lays itself out to where you have to do what we did at the northern portion of the site because of the drainage requirements, etc. Some of these requirements popped up just recently, as a matter of fact. When we first started designing the project, we weren't aware that we would have to install a dry retention system. We could have, at that point in time, done something with exfiltration trench to take care of the nutrient runoff. But the rules changed, and as the rules changed, we wind up with more issues as far as having to use up more open area for those purposes, and it limits our ability to be any more flexible as far as trying to preserve some of those trees. And again, I appreciate your concerns, and I wish there was a way to do that and make the project work, but...
Have you seen the Walmarts up at near the airport in Orlando?
No, I can't.
There's a shopping center very similar to that, includes Walmart, and they've done a terrific job in saving huge, big trees, bigger than we have listed here even. The parking lot is just gorgeous. It's almost like a park.
I've seen a number of projects that were able to do that. No doubt the economics in their particular case, whatever the land costs were, the building costs, etc., worked out so they could do that. On this particular project, I can assure you that it would be a fatal problem for us economically if we had to destroy any of those out parcel areas.
That part where you have the department store, where it's located, that's where another 6 oak trees are located, right there, the big square for the department store. Why can't you just flip that? You're going to ruin the wetlands, but you're going to ruin it anyway.
Well, first of all, in order to get Kohl's in the proximity of where they need to be within a center of this nature, that was the only location that we could put them at and still have our junior anchor adjacent to them on the west side, their requirements for their loading areas, etc., and the wetland that's behind them. It just didn't work. We've tried various layouts to see what would work better, and we wound up ultimately having to put Kohl's on the extreme east end in order to get all their criteria and all of the other criteria for the overall footprint designs to work out. It was not a thoughtless process, I can assure you, and I know you're not indicating that it was. But I wish that you can only know how much thought and effort was put into all of the layout, and it's a fully utilized site. But as you can see, we have a considerable amount of open area on the site in order to meet all of the criteria, and we still wind up a little short and have to do some of our mitigation off-site.
Have you considered moving these trees? You have at least 2 trees that are over 20 inches. I mean, they could be moved. I mean, it would be great specimen trees for someplace located in a parking lot for shade, or up against a building or near a building for aesthetics.
We have thought about moving trees, but from our understanding, trees of this nature, trying to transplant them, you're probably not going to be successful.
Oh, we have a pretty good success rate in this county moving trees of that size.
I would welcome.
Sure. I mean, you could go up to our environmental learning center and see a fantastic job. They even barged 20-inch trees from one site up the Indian River Lagoon, Intercoastal Waterway, up to environmentalists. I think it was 50-some oak trees that were moved.
I've seen them take them up the Intercoastal on barges, and I can only imagine what the cost was.
But we're not asking you to do that. We're just saying relocate them on the property a couple hundred feet either way. I mean, a 28-inch tree and a 20-inch tree is what we consider trees a specimen, right? Special interest.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes.
Hi.
Would you give us your name?
I'm Lisa Frazier with Kimley Horn and Associates.
I'm sorry, your first.
Lisa Frazier,
Lisa?
Kimley Horn and
Good evening.
Associates. I'm the environmental planner on staff at 601 21st Street, if you need my address. I am not the landscape architect. However, I do want to explain to you a little bit about what we did try to achieve on the site, because I understand your concerns, and so I want to relate to you a little bit how we looked at the site in the environmental side of it. In accordance with your code, we were to identify the upland area that was considered the best to be preserved, the most intact. You need to understand this site, though there are oaks on the site that were identified, the majority of this property has been highly impacted by past use. It was very much invaded, it still is very much invaded with Melaleuca, Brazilian pepper, a lot of invasives, there's a lot of trash, there's a lot of indigents that have been utilizing this property. So we went out there and identified the areas that we felt were still ecologically intact, and though pines are not noted as your specimen trees, the pine flatwoods on the site came out to have the highest indicators of an intact natural system. So that's where we wanted to concentrate our preservation efforts, as well as the wetland in the back. The wetland in the front is again has been highly impacted by
You're
past
talking about
use.
the west one?
Exactly, yes. The one on the west, it's been very impacted. It's very close to the road. It's very small. It already has a road through it. There's Melaleuca all the way throughout it. So in losing that, we were able to push everything into the site and preserve the wetland to the west. This area that we've all strove to preserve also provides us with that critical buffer for the residential area to the north. And in creating the littoral shelf that whole upland preserve area and the wetland, we feel that we have achieved a nice natural system. I believe the entire acreage of quote-unquote natural system, not under a conservation easement, but the natural system is almost, well, it's over 4 acres if you include the whole stormwater pond with the littoral shelf planted around it. So that was our thinking that way. Now, I am getting to your concern as far as the oak trees. Your code does allow us to mitigate by DBH, by the inches, and we have provided that. In the area that we concentrated on preservation, it still is impacted, heavily impacted with invasive species. And so we are removing a lot of that and replacing. If you see on this side, we've concentrated most of the oak mitigation, and on the other side, more of the palm mitigation, because we don't want to further impact the pine flatwoods. We want to put things in there that are much more compatible with that type of system. So in taking some of the oak trees, and again, I'm not the landscape architect, I did not analyze these existing oak trees, but in taking those existing oak trees and trying to place them in this existing area may be difficult and may be risky at best, because it's not quite the same soil system. It's more sandy, or I should say it's more of the pine flatwood. And so where we've concentrated a lot of our plantings is along the edges and along the buffers, in order to again create that buffer system. Does that help at least explain why we chose not to take that route? Is that an option? Sure, of course it's an option.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember right, it's not that expensive to move those trees, $5,000-6,000, and they can be moved. Putting a large tree like that in the middle of a parking lot or something would add a lot of aesthetics to the project. One of them is a 28-inch and one's a 20-inch, and these are substantial. I don't know how healthy they are. I haven't seen them.
Again, I apologize. I did
it could be that they're not that healthy as well. But that's my comment anyway, my opinion.
Well, Bob, your staff, I'm sure, has gone through all this, and they do meet the codes, correct?
I'll answer for Bob till he gets to the mic. Yes.
Okay.
But I think a lot of the process has been explained. We either had 2 or 3 TRC meetings on this, and one of the things we do obviously look at is tree preservation. But again, from staff's perspective, as far as the design and the layout, when you look at the wetlands that are really least impacted and makes most sense to preserve, the ones in the northeast, you look at the upland habitat that's the best to preserve. And one big factor from staff's perspective was to preserve the natural vegetation that's near the single-family development to the north. So we like to look at preservation areas and buffer areas kind of combining and providing more separation for the single-family residents to the north. I think the main building has to go east-west and front State Road 60. That's common in commercial development. I don't think there was any place else for the building to go as far as the oaks that are toward the middle. And I think that's what staff came down to was the last option, which is in the code, which is mitigation.
Right. Mr. Barquette, good afternoon. Evening.
Hi, Mr. Fletcher. I was trying my best not to stand up here, but
we were voting together.
Bruce Barquette. I practice at 756 Beachland Boulevard. I'm here representing the applicant. Dr. Baker, we really can't change the site plan on the fly, as you know. That just doesn't work. But Mr. Wake, you made a suggestion. How about if we look at moving?
Yeah, at least look at it.
Take a look. What my client has authorized me to tell you, we'll take a look at it, see if we can move it. I did want to point out that I know you're focusing on the larger ones. We're planting 280 inches of oaks. We're planting over 70 oaks. But in addition to, because
it might have 4 inches compared to a 20.
Well, I understand, but the live oaks, they grow pretty fast.
They are live oaks.
Oh, yes, sir. Well, let me say that. I think that's what I read. Yeah.
Mitigated with live oaks,
yes,
not laurel oaks.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But we will commit to taking a look at moving.
That's all we ask.
Okay.
That's all I would ask anyway.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Barquette.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any more comments?
I would just say that obviously our tree protection ordinance is not good enough.
Well, we just spent a year or so going through all of that. If you had changes you wanted to make, that was the place.
Well, we did. We increased the penalty, which was doubling the.
My point is, we can't change it tonight on the fly in the middle of an
You asked for comments.
If If there are no more comments, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Move to adopt as presented by staff, is that correct?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Opposed. And one opposed. What a surprise. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Barquette. Item number 4, public hearings. Realtors Association of Indian County Incorporated requests to amend the future land use map and redesignate approximately .075 acres from to CI and to rezone the plus or minus .075 acres from RM3 to CL. Plan amendment number LUDA 200606090-63102, RZON number 200606060-290-63103. Legislative, good evening.
For the record, my name is Stephen Durdo.
I think your mic is off, Steve. Thank you, sir.
For the record, my name is Stephen Durdo, Community Development Department. This evening we have a request for a small-scale amendment and rezoning. This is to redesignate .075 acres from L1 to CI land use and to rezone that .075 acres from RM3 to CL. Small-scale amendments are a little different than our normal comp plan amendment process. These are exempt from the twice a year, that's the January and July windows. They're a somewhat streamlined review. They do not go to DCA for review and then come back. There are a few potential impacts with these. It's one of the requirements. Another requirement is that it's 10 acres or less, and this is obviously less than 10 acres. And it cannot involve any environmental lands, and there are none involved in this one. The aerial shows the location of the site, and I've highlighted in red the area that is going to be or proposed for rezoning. It's probably slightly larger than the actual area. It's a subject .075 acres of property. It's located east of US 1, north of 67th Street, south of Quaydock Road. And this area that's highlighted is equivalent in size to an area that's being dedicated as right-of-way along Quaydock Road and 67th Street. That right-of-way dedication I've highlighted here in red. The Quaydock Road is .043 acres. The 67th Street is .032 acres, and those both total what is coming up here in blue to equal .075 acres. That's the area they're requesting to go to commercial. The existing land uses, we show the L1 is highlighted there in yellow, and then the commercial industrial land use is shown in red, and you can see the subject areas right there on that border. The existing zoning, you see that we're in an RM3 area, and the pink is the commercial light, and again, subject property right along that border. All plans are checked for consistency with the comprehensive plan, and the future land use element 14.3 requires that one of four criteria be met to approve a comp plan amendment. The first is a mistake in the approved plan. The second is an oversight in the approved plan. The third, a substantial change in circumstances. Or the fourth, which is a swap or reconfiguration of land uses at separate sites. Future land use policy 1.22 states that no commercial node with less than 70% development can be expanded. However, there are a few exceptions to that, and one of those exceptions is when right-of-way is dedicated and the expansion of the node does not increase the size, then it can be done, and in this particular case there is no expansion of the size of the node, and therefore this request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. In conclusion, the requested land use and rezoning is compatible with the surrounding properties, consistent with the comprehensive plan, It's exempt from the concurrency test because there is no additional commercial property created, and there's no additional environmental impacts. This time, staff supports this request, and we recommend that Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the Board of County Commissioners approve the request to change the land use and zoning as proposed. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Quaydock Road, as I understand it, is supposed to be designated as a historical sensitive or something like site. How did we get by that on this? We weren't supposed to be, as I understood it, this is a very sensitive area to be doing anything in, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm Bob Keating, County Community Development Director, and as part of the development project on this site, that's when we look at the specific relationship to the historic road. At rezoning time, we really can't look at any design characteristics.
Okay, so much for that possibility. Any other?
When this site develops, it probably will not access off of Quaydock. So I don't think that when the development issue comes forward, I don't think the historic road will be used for access for commercial development.
If I'm here at that time, I'm going to hold you to that stand.
You might hold me to it even if you're not.
I'll be in the audience. At least I'll still hold your feet to the fire. Any questions by the board for staff? No? This is a public hearing, so if there's anyone in the public that would like to be heard at this time, come right on down, sir. No, it's not quasi-judicial. Good evening. Would you introduce yourself with name and address for the record?
Robert Hamilton, 3135 67th Street. I call it Winter Beach. They call it Vero Beach.
I call it Winter Beach too, Bob.
Yeah. Property owner there. I don't oppose any development in the area. As a matter of fact, I like to see it coming. We got a new school up there, and we have a new fire department, and things are beginning to go. I just want to ask a few questions. I know that that the proposed property we're talking about now is on the north side of 67th Street, on the corner there in US 1. Is that right?
I'll let staff answer that, but I'm nodding yes, as I understand.
That's correct.
Okay. The question I want to ask, well, there's two. You mentioned Quaydock Road. That is a historical road. And the best I know of, when they tried to build the other subdivision down there, that's a no-no. You can't cross it or use it. Am I right or wrong?
Staff will answer that, but as I understand, that's correct.
That's correct. In this case, this site has frontage on 67th Street and US 1 as well as Quaydock Road, so we would not have, they have an option to not access Quaydock Road, and we would not let them access Quaydock Road.
Okay. Then my next question would be, we have property that's on the south side. There's a little wedge there, which is the Arnold property. Right. I think it's 84 feet. And then the family has 7 acres. Now, 67th Street, well, that'll be used to go in and out of the new building and all. Is that right?
That's correct. This site develops. That's correct.
Will that road be repaved or redone?
Yeah,
how far down will it go? Do you know?
Well, it'll have to be improved at least to the driveway for the business, and then a little bit beyond that for transition. But there'll need to be surveys of the existing site conditions in the area. But it'll probably be paved just to serve that driveway.
Okay. Is there any plans for a turnoff off of US 1 into that area?
Not you're talking about a northbound right turn lane on 67th Street?
To pull over and get off?
None that I'm aware of, because that commercial site is pretty small. I would be surprised if it could have enough development to warrant that sort of turn lane. So I don't think you'll see a northbound right turn lane for 67th Street.
Okay.
Just my guess.
All right. And then the next question is, we have 7 acres, the family does, on the south side there. The rezoning will not affect our 7 acres, will it, and our taxes?
I can't speak to your taxes, but I can speak to rezoning, and no, it will not have an impact on properties to the east.
It will stay like it?
The zoning will stay the same. That's correct.
Okay. That's all I wanted to know, just some information, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Anyone else would like to be heard in the public? Seeing no other people, I'll close the public hearing. Any more questions for staff from the board? No other questions? Do I have a motion?
Move approval is recommended by staff.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, or any more discussion? No more discussion. All in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed, like sign? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 4B. It's consideration of amendments to restrictions on parking commercial vehicles in residential areas, LDR Chapter 901, 911, and 912, legislative. Mr. Bowling, good evening.
Thank you,
again,
Mr. Chairman. I think there are now at least two people that will hold my feet to the fire on access on that last site.
Stanbridge and me, right?
And Mr. Hamilton. The list is growing. This particular hearing is an amendment to the land development and regulations, and it's actually an amendment to a couple of chapters in the land development regulations dealing with commercial vehicles, and that's specifically commercial vehicles parked in residential areas. The purpose of the regulation is primarily aesthetics, mostly to deal with the type and size of vehicles that are parked in residential areas. Secondarily, safety in terms of there are some commercial vehicles that are so large, if they were to be parked in residential driveways, it could conceivably have some safety issues. But it's primarily aesthetics, and all the local governments actually that staff contacted when we did some survey work, all of them have regulations and some prohibitions. It's very, very common. The proposed changes before you all tonight were actually initiated by the Board of County Commissioners in September. It was basically, they came to conclude that there's a need to update our existing regulations. They're based on rated capacity, otherwise known as carrying capacity. And as it was discussed at the board meeting in September, carrying capacity is not an observable attribute. In other words, you could have, and I'll just use these for illustrations, let's say that these were commercial vehicles, pickup trucks, even though they're basically the same size and dimensions and so forth, have the same general appearance, they have different carrying capacities. We've got 3/4 ton, 1 ton, and over 1 ton, 1 1/4 ton. Our existing regulations would prohibit anything with a carrying capacity of over 1 ton as a commercial vehicle being parked in a residential area. And the board concluded, and rightly so, that that type of regulation doesn't really get to the aesthetic purpose, which is really dealing with size and appearance and type of vehicle. So staff has been directed and has looked at and researched our existing regulations, and we found really two parts of the regulation that staff is proposing to change. One is the definition itself of commercial vehicles, and the other is a restrictions section in the code. But first of all, our existing regulations, the definition is based on how a vehicle is used, as well as some of the physical attributes. And also our existing regulations deal with carrying capacity, which again has more to do with the suspension system and some things that are not observable characteristics as opposed to the actual appearance. Our research of 18 local governments, most of them who have updated their ordinances recently really deal with size as opposed to carrying capacity. We also looked at the size and physical attributes of late model pickups and cargo vans, and here was staff's conclusion. One is we need to change the definition and base the definition of commercial vehicle on physical attributes that you can observe. That's the purpose in the first place. And the second is we should clearly prohibit certain types of vehicles and spell that out in our code. We don't allow dump trucks and other types of commercial vehicles in residential areas now, but we don't say that specifically, and we think the code would be improved by saying it. Here are the changes that are proposed from the packet. The most important ones really are these definition changes to the definition of commercial vehicle, and the idea here is to do away with how a vehicle is used and focus solely on the physical attributes of the vehicle itself. And let me just point out, in Section 1, a commercial vehicle would be defined as any vehicle that has a boom, a rack, or other facility used for transporting or handling materials, equipment other than personal effects of private passengers. And then we list some of the specific types of vehicles that would clearly be commercial vehicles: bucket trucks, trucks with booms, dump trucks, semi-tractors, semi-trailers, and other similar vehicles. So that would be one test. It's a commercial vehicle if it meets those criteria, or it will be considered a commercial vehicle if it's not a recreational vehicle and it's over a gross vehicle weight of 15,000 pounds, length of 23 feet, and height of 9 feet. We found these kind of dimensions. First of all, they would allow the larger pickup trucks that are common passenger type of vehicles, and also we noted that the local governments that had recently updated their regulations seem to use these sorts of thresholds. The other restrictions that are proposed is to codify what's allowed by interpretation now of allowing one commercial vehicle per residence in our agricultural districts. We allow that as a policy now, and we're not proposing to change that, but to keep the limit to one vehicle. The other is to retain the exemptions for if you have a large, commercial vehicle at your home delivering or on a service call, that obviously should be allowed, and that's retained. And tow trucks on call, the sheriff or police department, are also that exemption is retained. And we will continue the prohibition on vehicles that are used to haul fuel or explosives. That's it in a nutshell. The Professional Services Advisory Committee looked at the proposed change and voted 8-0 to recommend that the board adopt these changes. And that is staff's recommendation as well. And I'd be glad to try to answer any questions you might have.
So the option, or the intent is not to stop someone that has a business van. That's correct. Quite all right.
That's correct. And the idea here is that, let's say you have a cargo van and it may have a sign on the side, but everything is enclosed. Any equipment or anything is enclosed. That's allowed. It's allowed now. And what this regulation will do is, if the carrying capacity of that van is rated a certain way, it's not something that's going to keep somebody from being able to park that. We're looking at size, we're looking at dimensions, we're looking at vehicle type, not the carrying capacity.
I'm in favor of this. I just don't want to get people that are in business, small businesses, can take their truck home.
Right. This should be friendly for that.
Are we addressing where they park these, as in yard, street, driveway?
Right. They're allowed to be in a garage, in a carport, and in a driveway.
Okay. Not on the street. Not on the street.
That's correct. We don't have them. Right. This is not on the street. Although obviously driveways go out into the right of way, and that's as long as they're in the driveway, that's fine. And that's not proposing to change.
Okay.
I have a few questions.
Go right ahead.
So we don't limit signage on these trucks then? They could have Joe's Plumbing written on it.
Joe the plumber. Here we go.
I bring that.
That's correct. No,
even the pickup trucks.
That's correct. Some people use, they use magnetic signs sometimes, or they can put their own.
Right. Then
be painted on. That's correct.
The other question: you don't specifically say pickup truck. Now that's a style of truck that comes from the factory with a pickup bed on it, as opposed to all other trucks you buy as a cab and a chassis. But you don't want to use the word pickup in this?
Well, what we tried to do here in this definition of commercial vehicle is define it only if it has as a commercial vehicle, only if it has a rack or a boom or a bucket or something else on it. If it's a pickup truck style, the style doesn't matter, just the size of it. As long as it meets the 23-foot length and so forth, then it's going to be fine.
Okay, and the other question is you mentioned gross weight. That's the truck loaded.
That's the truck. Yeah, all the total number of passengers and loading, and I mean that gross weight is the maximum that.
All right, but that's.
And that's a rating that It can be found, if any model type, we can find that out.
You don't want to use curb weight with the truck empty.
No, it's not curb. We want to use gross vehicle weight.
So you're going to expect someone to park a truck there that's fully loaded?
That's right. Worst case, we're going to look, and that's an easy to monitor type of requirement, because you can get that online for all the models.
Well,
it doesn't
I have
vary.
them here.
Yeah, and it doesn't vary by like the suspension package and so forth.
Well, for example, the Ford F-50, it has a curb weight of 8,228 pounds, and in theory it's going to hold 1.25 tons, which is another 2,500 pounds. So that brings it up to 1,100 pounds roughly. I mean, that's far from the 1,500.
15,000. Yes, correct.
15,000.
We found some that went up. I think probably 12,000. A little over 12,000 actually was a common type of large pickup truck, and that was as large as we got. We wanted to make sure that 15,000 pounds was large enough to not accidentally net somebody that we didn't want to.
Oh, yeah, because you can get some rack trucks. Well, not rack truck is specifically eliminated here, but a pickup truck when someone modifies the bed and changes it, and it might not look well. A flatbed, for example, you're assuming a rack truck will be also called a flatbed truck, right?
Right.
Okay.
And the other thing, too, I want to mention, again, this is a county-wide ordinance, and there may be residential areas that have their own private restrictions, deed restrictions. That's their own restriction, and they certainly do. So this is county-wide, but it will not affect, obviously, private restrictions.
County-wide, non-municipal.
That's correct. Unincorporated.
Unincorporated area only. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one, Greg. A guy's got a Ford 250 and he's a plumber or a welder. He's got a small boom in the back right-hand corner of the bed of his truck. That's okay, isn't it?
I think the way we define it is if you've got a boom that's visible when the vehicle is parked, that is a commercial vehicle. It's treating it a lot like a bucket truck, like we do now.
But that wouldn't look like a pickup truck. That would be probably one of those trucks with the compartments on the side that you're talking about, right?
Right. They do, as I understand, they do make pickup trucks that have booms and other things that are mounted in the bed that can fold up, and they stay in the bed, and that would be allowed.
They use that.
If it's a type that's sticking up and is basically like a boom on the back of it, that would be a commercial vehicle and would not be allowed in a residential.
But if the boom was removable, it would be allowed.
Right, or collapsible.
Collapsible.
Well, I have your same trouble. There are carpenters, plumbers, and people that have those little 3 or 4 foot, hand crank booms on the back of them. I think you're going to run into trouble there, but that's a suggestion to you to try and work that into the system. Also, I want to make sure that there are very heavy trucks out there that are for people with their disabilities, where they lift their wheelchair out and that sort of stuff. I want to make sure those people are okay.
Right. I think the 15,000 pound threshold is meant to be.
I don't think any van goes near that.
No cargo vans or modified vans that we researched
falls under that high. Even with the big hydraulic lift.
Would come anywhere near 15,000 pounds.
Okay. That's a big. A delivery truck would meet that, but nothing.
Yes.
That's
great.
But that's a box truck.
That's our finding.
But you would call that a box truck then, anyway, a delivery truck.
Yeah, and a lot of times that would exceed. A lot of those exceed 9 foot height. Some of them the length.
That was my concern, the box truck issue. And I don't know the dimensions of box trucks, so I'm not sure if they fall within the boundaries of the height and then the weight. And have you done any research on that? Because box trucks in residential areas I don't think it goes. But is there any way that they're allowed within this?
Well, I guess you could have some shorter ones that shorter in height and shorter in length that might not have a 15,000 pound gross vehicle weight.
Then can we add something to the list of ones that are excluded and add box truck in there? Dump truck, semi-tractors, box truck.
I think what we would probably want to do, if we might want to attach a dimension to that. I'm just suggesting that, thinking out loud. What we found, I can't think of anything that I would call a box truck being under 8 feet in height.
Yeah, you need some metrics to go along with it.
We could do metrics.
8 feet from the chassis or from the ground?
From the ground, measured from the ground.
Well, you have 9 feet written.
We have 9 feet here, that's correct. And I know that most of them are 9 feet or taller, what I would consider a box truck. And that's measured from the ground.
Veterinarian trucks or with all those compartments on the side might come close. Well, maybe not.
What about RVs on top of the trucks? RVs on top of the trucks?
Right. RVs are different, and in fact, we don't consider RVs to be commercial vehicles. They're a type of personal vehicle, and they have their own definition. They are allowed to be parked in garages or carports if they're tall enough, or in the driveway, but they have a limitation. I believe it's 32 feet in length if they're parked in a residential area. But we have to treat them differently. They're just a different.
The recreational vehicles are 32 feet.
I think it's 32 feet. And if you have it longer than that, it needs to be at a storage facility, which is
or enclosed.
Correct.
I'd like to get back a little more specific on the box truck. I'm sorry to bring you back to that.
We strayed a little bit.
I want to target that, please.
Okay.
How can we target that?
I think that we can do more research and look at the. I think the height dimension is probably what is going to. It would probably be a good way to regulate that. I think we'll probably find that most are above 8 feet. But we can.
The maximum truck height is going to be 14. That can even go on a road. I believe it's 14 feet. So 9 feet, you're only 5 feet away from that. You could have a box truck that's 9 feet, maybe.
Stan, I'm not thinking well about these dimensions. You see many electricians or plumbers, and they have, I would call it a box truck. Are those going to continue to be okay, or is that restricted? I mean, guy's got a business and he can't really afford to go out and
parking space for a damn truck
and buy parking space.
I have the same problem. I don't want to impact the small businessman. You know, I mean this.
Yeah, but this truck would get too large too.
Yeah, it is a balancing act. It's aesthetics in neighborhood, and also allowing someone to have their own business and not have not only the expense of another place, but fuel efficiency and everything. Just drive home, drive. What I think.
I just want to err on the side of the businessman. The business of America is business. I don't want to put small business people in a notch somewhere they can't get.
I am comfortable that 9 feet is tall enough that, again, what do you call a box truck? When I see a delivery truck that, like where they throw newspapers off of, that's generally at least a little bit above 9 feet. But there may be shorter ones that, they still have boxes on them. They may be smaller. If it was below these dimensions, it would not be considered a commercial vehicle, and it could be parked in a residential area. And it is kind of a visual thing. You'd probably like to see examples of what's at 8 foot, what's at 9 foot.
Well, here's the other thing in here. You said items other than personal effects of private passengers. A plumbing truck that has plumbing equipment on it, he wouldn't be allowed then.
That's correct. If he had a rack and had equipment hanging off of it, it's a commercial vehicle. If it's in a bed or enclosed or in a truck, then you don't see it, and it's
because we have that caveat the personal effects of private passengers, so that
meaning you can have a rack that's like you would normally see with a standard personal vehicle.
When you say residential area, what are you targeting? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that
right. It would be either residentially zoned property or agriculturally zoned property where residences are allowed. That's why we have the one exception for residences in agricultural areas, that they can have one commercial vehicle.
So you've got a guy with a house on 5 acres, and he can't have a.
He can have.
Okay.
One that exceeds, and that's
only one.
One.
That's correct. That's I just would say that's been the interpretation for probably 20 years or so, but we've not had it specified in the code. We think it would be good to have.
We'd all like to see brand new shiny cars sitting in front of every house, but
I'd rather see them in the garage.
See, there's the other end of the spectrum.
The balancing act.
I just want you guys to make sure that we don't put anybody out of business.
I have one other question.
Go right ahead.
What about, a pickup truck with the rack on top with all the pipe on top and ladders on top, where the rack goes?
That's a commercial vehicle.
That's a commercial vehicle.
It is now, and it is in the proposed ordinance.
I want to make sure of that, because that's why I'd like to see the word, pickup truck is in there somewhere. That's allowed, because that's a class of vehicle. I don't think there's any pickup truck that wouldn't fit this requirement.
Right, I agree, and that's why basically pickup trucks are not mentioned in 1 or 2 here, because they're not going to exceed unless they're Bigfoot or something that you're going to see at a rodeo or whatever. You're not going to have a pickup.
What we're describing here is trucks that are not allowed.
Correct.
As opposed to trucks that are allowed.
That's correct.
Okay.
So Stan, a guy's got a screening service and he's got a rack on his Ford 250. Is that allowable now and not going to be allowable if we pass this, or if we suggest to the board that it be passed?
It is not allowed now.
Oh.
It is, and I think basically let me put it to you this way. Right now it's considered a commercial vehicle, and right now you cannot have a commercial vehicle at a residence unless it has a rated capacity of 1 ton or less.
So it'd be a Ford 150.
Yeah.
That's the regulation right now.
So, I see all the time trucks like that in subdivisions that I go in. So now we're talking really, it's going to be an enforcement issue. It's going to be more enforced when this is passed, because now we have this new regulation.
Code enforcement.
This kind of frees up the regulation. It doesn't.
Yeah, it makes it easier. We're improving upon it. We're adding a 1/4 ton.
It makes it more legal.
Well, right now the guy's going in there and parking his truck, and and it's a bigger truck than a 1/4 ton. Right now he's going in there and parking it in this driveway, and apparently it must be okay because they're doing it.
No.
So now we get. Well, I see a lot of them, Jerry.
Well, maybe they haven't been caught. That's all.
And that's my question. And now when this happens, Bob, Stan, is there going to be an enforcement issue because you've got this new regulation and those guys are going to be affected by it?
Somebody will have to call it into code enforcement, and code enforcement will have to go over and
go out there and give them a ticket or something.
Give them a notice. I'm real nervous about this.
We're not going to change our enforcement procedures any, but I think you all need to just make a determination. Are racks okay? I mean, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be a little more specific. I think our current regulation is really hard for us to interpret. It's difficult to know a rated capacity for a truck without us going to the internet. Right. I think we're trying to make the rules specific and black and white, easy for our code enforcement officers to understand. But I think it comes to you to make a recommendation to the board. Should people in a neighborhood, do they want to have trucks with racks and boxes on it and pipes and PVC pipe hanging on the side?
No.
What are the expectations?
If I'm running my business, if I have a business in my home and I'm doing screen pool enclosures or something, I want to be able to park my truck with my screen stuff on top of the truck.
Well, you shouldn't be running a business out of a house.
Excuse me? The law says you can.
Well,
I'm
you have
sorry.
to permit for it, though.
I'm sorry, but the law today says you can run a business out of a house. Welcome to America. It's been that way ever since we started. I'm really worried about this. So
I'm now against it. If it means, and there are a lot of different neighborhoods in Indian River County, and there are a lot of working people that are in subdivisions that don't affect the people in it. And I can understand that there are other gated communities, and I'm not picking on them, that there might be a real concern if somebody lived there that had one of those types of vehicles. But I don't want to see something that eliminates racks on a truck so that a plumber or an electrician or somebody like that can't park their vehicle at their own house. I'm against it.
Right, but you don't want to just be against it. We've got to change this to make it workable.
Okay.
I mean, do you want to take racks off? Do you want to take boxes off? I mean, we can have just the weight, height, and length restrictions. I mean, you've got to give us some direction.
I'd be much happier with that because I'm not going to vote for it, too, if it'll kick somebody, plumber, screener, or something else out. I think we need to allow that. There aren't that many of them, and these are hardworking people, and it's difficult enough as it is.
Well, Commissioner Davis is really just wanted the one kind of truck to be approved, right? I mean, that was sort of the
originally
intent.
Accommodate the new length of the new vehicles.
Yeah.
Right.
And why don't we just go that way and not get involved with all this other stuff?
Well,
make it simple, I mean.
Well, because it's not simple now.
Yeah. You have to have definitions of...
Yeah, I mean, it talks about a vehicle that's designed or used principally for business. I mean, that we can't determine that if we look at it.
What does that mean?
But you haven't determined it before, right?
Right. We're changing it so we don't have to make that determination.
It's been a bit arbitrary before. They're trying to put some definitions to it, so it won't be so
maybe
arbitrary.
It should be arbitrary.
Trying to close a few loopholes.
I would suggest, just kind of following up on really what Bob was saying, if it is your desire, under item 1 here, if you eliminated rack, you can concentrate on a vehicle with a boom or other facilities for transporting or handling. And I think it is instructive to have some specific types of vehicles. Without question, are commercial vehicles, bucket trucks, dump trucks, semi-tractors, I think it's useful to have those types. I think the only discussion so far, and this is good, this is what LDRs are all about. You know, if you want to allow trucks with racks, then you would strike through rack.
But then you'd allow every landscaper to have a truck in his yard.
That's correct. And a decision needs to be made. The code either has to regulate that or not. And it is countywide. I mean, we deal with a whole lot of different areas, a whole lot of different neighborhoods.
I wouldn't want to see rack trucks with every landscaper with his trailer. A pickup truck's a different story.
Well, there aren't going to exactly be 20 landscapers in your neighborhood. There's going to be 1 or 2 maybe for a large development or something.
But it degrades the neighborhood when you start having trucks parked in front of a house.
Having working people in a neighborhood degrades the neighborhood. Excuse me, I take exception to that. I'm going to vote against this unless we strike the racks.
Can somebody explain to me what exactly racks look like?
A typical landscape truck, flatbed with the wooden racks along the side.
Oh, I thought you meant racks that were...
Well, that could also be racks across the top, yeah.
But the plumbers and the landscape guys and the
irrigation
people that do the screens and the irrigations have...
the pipes.
The pipes come up out of the side of the bed.
It's kind of like a frame that they build up.
4 feet of a frame around it, a square frame around it. And they have
now you're looking at commercial in a residential area.
That's the way it is right now. I mean, I see them all the time. Yep. Those type of working people in some subdivisions, they park their truck in their driveway. The car's up in the carport, and
it's just amazing to me that at this time, when there's so much problem with working people, that we would want to try and stiff these people with some more regulations.
Well, that's not allowed now.
They should be.
Well, we're going to determine whether they can or not, and as Greg said, unless we allow those types of trucks with racks so that a working person and family can have their vehicle in their driveway, I am not going to vote for it.
Well, what we're determining is what's the size limitation of those vehicles.
Well, we can do that. Staff could, well, you know where we're going, Bob. Staff can get together some way to define that.
Right, but I just want to know, I guess there's not a consensus of racks or not racks.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the staff's recommendations the way it's written now, and let's see where it goes from here.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
And discussion? Any more discussion? Again, I'm not going to vote for this unless it allows working people to have
I call the question.
We're under discussion. I'm not going to vote for this unless we allow people to have, working people to have a vehicle in front of their car, house. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
There are 2 in favor. All opposed? Aye.
Let's say aye.
All right, then let's go back and work on it again. Is it the rack issue?
I don't know how to define it as a rack issue or not, but it's an issue of, yeah, I guess it is coming down to a rack issue, yeah.
Okay.
For working people that are out there struggling, trying to get, private business, or even if they're working for someone.
So as long as it's still within the 9 feet restriction, the 15,000 pounds, the 23-foot length, and it has racks, you're okay?
Yes.
Okay.
And a small boom.
Now, by this small boom, I think you're looking at something that looks like a downrigger on the back of a boat.
Yeah. Other booms that come out, actually those booms rotate in and around. It would be inside of the square rack.
Or something like that out of there.
So
Is there a certain weight capacity of these that we could use as a restriction?
Yeah, it's they're pickups mostly. Some of them are double wheelies, but.
Okay, how about we go ahead and approve this and take the rack issue out and have staff work on the small booms.
Small booms.
Have them work on that issue, okay?
I can see.
So I make a recommendation that we approve this with the elimination of the rack restriction and have staff come up with some wording on the boom.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Aye. Mr. White is opposed. Boy, we waded through that one, didn't we? Well, that's our job. Thank you, staff, for bringing that. That's well done. Sorry to take your time up like that, but it's a good discussion. Item 4, Part B, consideration of Commissioners' matters.
I have to.
Donna?
Okay, we came up with some changes on the sewer hookup requirements on the barrier island. And there are some questions that I'm now a little confused, and some other people are confused, and they've asked questions on it. So I thought I'd give you an opportunity to explain this. The sewer hookup that's being mandated, is that new construction? Is it single-family construction? Is it old construction? What is that?
Well, okay. Nothing's being mandated. I think you're talking about during the evaluation and appraisal report discussion.
Yeah.
And the way that's structured in the EAR, and remember, the EAR is just a guide to what we do next year when we amend the plan. So there's no specific wording. And basically, it's pretty much structured that policy be amended to say that hookup to sewer is required when it's available.
For homes that are already built?
Yeah, but I mean it's both. But we will be much more specific next year when we amend the plan. That's when we can provide the detail exactly what it means. Right now we've said generally in the EAR the evaluation is, hey, we maybe need to do something about this because septic tanks close to water bodies can have problems. So we've said the policy should say something like hook up to sewer when it's available. When we get to next year and we actually amend the policy, we can be really specific as to what it means. In the EAR, we didn't have to be specific.
Because I understand that some people will have to put in lift stations, and we're talking thousands of dollars.
Well, let me tell you, we are not talking about a lift station for a separate single-family house. Ideally, what we'd be looking at is a sewer extension project in like an entire subdivision or a phase of a subdivision or one road of a subdivision, where you get economies of scale and you have one lift station serving a number of houses. And just to tell you, the health department has been really writing some new regulations. They've been working with us for the past year or so that started out, I think they wanted mandatory hookup for any new houses or changes to houses that were oceanfront. And I think it's evolved to just restrictions on septic tank and drain field location, which in some cases may mandate hookup. But again, that's kind of on hold right now, I think, too. Okay. But the good news is we haven't been completely specific in the ER, and we will be specific when we amend the comp plan.
Okay, thank you.
How do they do that now, Bob? If they run a system by your house now, you're required to hook up, or you have the option not to? Okay, never mind. 3 to 5 days later.
Right now, we don't require mandatory hookup until there is some triggering point, like a building permit to do an addition to the house or something like that, and not a building permit just to put on a new roof. It would
not a new door, but a new,
right.
Yeah.
But if there is some change in a building permit for an expansion or something, that's when it mandatory kicks in.
That's the letter where St. John's denied our request for the hydrology report.
Donna has here. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Donna.
Where do we stand on St. John's denying us the hydrology report or the funds for it?
The way I read it, and Stan may want to weigh in here, is I think St. John's is saying geology doesn't change too much in 20 years. And that I think they read between the lines and said the county really wants to get a handle on what's happening with the groundwater resources themselves, the aquifers. And I think what they're saying is, to do that, it would be better to have a real good system of monitoring wells in place, and they're in the process of doing that, and that will probably achieve our objective better than doing the geology study.
I mean, it does look at different data, but in the recommendations, it was do this type of study or have comparable data. And I think what St. John's is saying is we're going to have ongoing monitoring wells that could be there for decades. So we will get good information as soon as they're in, and then ongoing information rather than kind of a snapshot. And so that's where it is right now.
Well, we were going to try and piggyback the seismic reports on this. So what's going to happen with that issue?
It would go away.
It goes away.
Yeah, disappears.
That's a shame.
So the system that the district has is supposed to be in 2012, will be complete, they say here. And that'll be monitoring wells. And they have one going in for deep Florida aquifer in 2010, coming up in 2 years. So they've got a program already going, is what you're saying.
Right, and I think Ms. Keys is correct. What it doesn't include is a seismic profile type of issue, but it does have a lot of, obviously, monitoring well data.
Any other matters from commissioners?
Just a comment. I'm a little suspect of the St. John's taking that position, honestly.
Oh, ye of little faith.
Why?
I'd just rather see the study and the resulting information that would be available in a variety of areas for the county.
It's called experience with persons. Any other commissioner matters? Any planning matters? I see you have a package for us again.
Just two things. One is just want to go back to the LDR discussion, and just that it's good. That we really need to get into those kinds of discussions, and that's better to have that discussion now than in front of the Code Enforcement Board or an interpretation issue. So that was good. The only thing I wanted to mention is that on next Wednesday, November 19th, will be the special hearing on mining regulations. And when you get your packets, I would just note one thing in particular, one attachment in particular you might want to pay attention to. We prepared a chart that took each of the 38 recommendations on one side of the chart. On the other side, it says where in the proposed regulations that recommendation is addressed, and a real short summary of how it was addressed. So I would just, when you get the packet, I would, if you want to, just jump right to that chart, and because I think we all have a pretty good understanding of the 38 recommendations, and that might make it easier. The other thing I wanted to mention was that on November 4th, the Board of County Commissioners gave staff the direction to be sure to advertise the P&Z meeting coming up on the 19th and the board meeting, so that the special exception versus administrative permit issue can be considered. So the ordinance is advertised, and we actually prepared two versions of the ordinance. one with Chapter 911 changed.
These guys are ready.
Change from administrative permit to special exception, and one without that. And so really the two options are special exception or administrative permit kind of plus. Administrative permit with notice requirements, administrative permit with run the meeting like a public hearing and allow public comment to put that in the code. So those options are in the packet, and when you all consider it next week, you can say, yes, we recommend special exception, or we recommend administrative permit with these other conditions.
We've already done that, though, and county commissioners decided...
Threw it away.
Well, that's why I'm mentioning this change. On November 4th, the board said, I don't know that the board's position has changed, the position of individual members, but what the board did instruct us is they want to keep that option open at the LDR hearing. So we are. So you will make a recommendation again on that issue.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought our direction was to forget the special exception.
It was. On October 6th, it was. On November 4th, the board said,
think about it.
We don't want to, we don't want to close off that option.
Guess how we're going to vote
at this point.
Watch the meeting then.
So that's all that I had for you.
Any other matters? Attorneys matters.
Nice to see you all again.
We welcome you aboard again. We miss you, honestly. No other matters, we'll adjourn. Thank you very much, guys.
The Youth Guidance Volunteer Program of Indian River County has been serving the at-risk youth population, ages 4 to 16, for over 32 years. We serve over 700 children each year, and we have touched over 20,000 young lives. The Youth Guidance Volunteer Program of Indian River County is a mentoring and activities program for at-risk kids in the community, ages 4 to 16. Our goal is to help level the playing field between these disadvantaged youth and their more advantaged peers. Our number one goal is to pair them each with their own mentor that they can do activities with one-on-one and show them things in life that they may not otherwise have a chance to experience.
Hello, my name is Michelle Dion, and I've been a youth guidance mentor since 1997. I'm now matched with a 10-year-old beautiful little girl by the name of Caitlin. We have been matched for 4 years now. Caitlin has been my inspiration in life. She and I have so much in common. The best thing I love about Caitlin is she's always there for me, and I will always be there for her.
I feel really special that Michelle picked me as her little sister, because before I was kind of lonely and I had no one really to talk to.
My name is Mark Hornbuckle, and I'm a youth guidance mentor. I've been a mentor for several years. My kids are grown and they're both off in college, and having another young person in my life gives me the opportunity to do the things that I really like to do. It's very rewarding just to see the inspiration that a young kid has that you know would never be seeing the things you're showing him.
I feel very fortunate that Mark chose me out of all the other kids that he could have chosen, but we do have a lot of things that we have in common.
My name is Lynn. I have been a mentor for the past 3 years. I am a mentor to a girl named Indigo. We both like nature very much and appreciate taking care of nature, so we're into ecological things. So I think that youth guidance has not only been a wonderful experience for Indigo, it's been a fantastic experience for me.
Well, at first I didn't know her and I just said hi, but after the few weeks of meeting her and going places with her, I really like her and I want to have her forever. I think she's the best mentor ever.
If you just have a couple of hours a week to incorporate a child into your life, it can make a tremendous difference in the life of a child.
For more information about how you can be a special friend to a kid like me, just call the nice ladies at Youth Guidance at 770-5040 or check them on the web at ircyouth.com.
Far from the bustling cities that make Florida one of the nation's most urban states is an environment that allows for the renewal of both body and soul. Encompassing nearly 1 million acres, Florida state forests provide visitors with unique back-to-nature experiences. Managed by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services Division of Forestry, Florida's more than 30 state forests strike a balance between the environment, resource management, and outdoor recreation.
The trees right there on the side doesn't it?
Acting as stewards of these lands, the Division of Forestry protects and maintains the biological diversity of the many ecosystems found in and around the state forests. State forests such as Blackwater River, Withlacoochee, Jennings, Lake Wales Ridge, Gothey, and Pine Log exemplify the many public benefits that result from effective land management. Multiple-use land management is key to the success of the state forest system, and protecting the natural environment is the cornerstone. Florida State Forests provide protected habitat for many types of flora and fauna, including endangered or other species of concern, such as the red-cockaded woodpecker and gopher tortoise. Safeguarding this natural environment helps ensure the continuance of the state's distinctive and wondrous wildlife. Protecting this habitat is accomplished through careful use of sophisticated land management techniques. Prescribed burning, for instance, enhances the environment by simulating the natural growth cycle of the forest. Pioneered by early Native Americans, this technique not only improves wildlife habitat and forage, it reduces the negative impact of noxious, non-native plant species. It also controls underbrush that, if left unchecked, could fuel devastating wildfires. The general public has appreciated Florida's state forests for their abundance of outdoor recreational opportunities. More than 800,000 visitors experience the natural beauty of Florida's state forests each year.
The foresters are working to promote the longleaf pine and
the natural splendor of Florida's state forests attracts naturalists from around the world who visit to experience the extraordinary environment and varied wildlife. Visitors can learn from a local expert during guided tours.
I saw Carolina chickadees here with the tufted titmouse this last.
Bird watchers flock to the forests in hope of adding to their life's list of sightings. A wealth of trails allows for nature watching, whether by foot, horseback, even mountain bike. Adventurer, young and old alike, can roam the forest with only a map and compass.
Remember, we line up the needle.
Whether pitching a tent in a primitive campsite or setting up in a full facility campground, camping is the perfect outlet for getting away from the hassle of urban life. These are just some of the activities ideally suited for the lush and tranquil setting that Florida's state forests provide. Many state forests also include archaeological and historical resources that are preserved for the future. Some of Florida's most beautiful rivers flow through the state forests. Canoeing down one of these pristine, meandering waterways is yet another way to experience Florida's state forests. Fishing and boating are also popular water activities. But a cool, refreshing dip is still the favorite way to escape the summer heat. All this is offered within a natural, idyllic setting unmatched by any theme park. The sheer size of Florida state forests itself is a marvel, providing not just solitude and enjoyment for visitors, but also renewable resources for society's use. The state forests contribute greatly to Florida's economy, serving as the foundation for an $8 billion a year industry. Ongoing restoration efforts help ensure that future generations will benefit from these renewable resources. Wholesome family recreation, wildlife habitat, managed renewable resources. These are just some of the benefits that state forests provide Floridians. Florida State Forests, striking a balance and enhancing our lives since 1936.
Doesn't come any better than this. Wholesome, delicious, and nutritious food fresh from Florida.
And the safety of that food is important to everyone.
You put your trust in us to keep a watchful eye on everything we produce. That's why from planting to harvesting, we work hard to provide safe and healthy food for you and your family. Because we don't just grow the food.
We serve it to our families, too.
Safe, affordable, and abundant. Food for thought from Florida's farmers.
Good health is important to everyone, and the best way to keep healthy is to eat right and be active. By eating fresh Florida fruits and vegetables and exercising daily, you'll be on track for a healthy lifestyle. So whatever your game, whether you're stepping up to the plate or heading into crunch time, taking it to the basket, or digging in, stay fit and eat right with fresh Florida fruits and vegetables. Good health, it's a game of inches. Who should you call with questions about auto repair shops, charities, checkout scanners, gas pumps, health clubs, intrastate movers, landlord-tenant disputes, price gouging, telemarketers, travel agencies? And that's just the start. Help in Florida is just a phone call away. 1-800-HELP-FLA.
Our call center is the state central office for handling all types of consumer complaints. Call us for help. I'm Florida Agriculture Commissioner Charles Bronson. Current conditions here in Florida have set the stage for an extremely dangerous wildfire season.
What's worse, about 1/4 of wildfires are set by arsonists. We need your help to stop this crime. Report suspicious activity by calling the Arson Alert Hotline. You can remain anonymous and possibly claim a reward. The best way to stop arsonists is to let them know you're watching.
Global warming is a problem.
Sound the alarm!
We think it's an important thing to save energy, to protect the environment, to protect the future.
Every who in Whoville makes a difference.
We need everyone!
Together, we can all make a difference.
Save energy with Energy Star, and then you can be
a solution.
Go to EnergyStar.gov/kids to see what else you can do.
Other cars. He didn't watch out for my mother. She looks both ways. She was always careful. I should have stopped for her. Drivers are always in a hurry.
Please, look for pedestrians. Stop for them. Think of the impact you could make.
What's up for October? This month we have a trick and a treat. One is in the morning sky and one is in the evening sky. Hello and welcome. I'm Jane Houston Jones at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. Early risers will be able to see a tricky target this month. It's Mercury. Mercury is just 1.5 times the size of our own moon, and it orbits the sun in 3 months. In early October, NASA's Messenger spacecraft flies past Mercury for the 2nd time this year. And in 2011, Messenger will be the first spacecraft to actually orbit Mercury. Look in the eastern sky 30 minutes before the sun rises from the 16th of the month on. Mercury can be seen about 20 degrees above the horizon, and it will be easier to see towards the end of the month. With the unaided eye, Mercury looks like a star, and through a telescope, it'll look like a tiny version of the first quarter moon on the 16th, and like a tiny waxing gibbous moon on the 22nd. Halloween is a great time to look up in the night sky from your own neighborhoods. And this year we have more than one treat to offer. Both Venus and Jupiter are easy to see. the slender crescent moon joins the two planets a half hour after sunset. The European Space Agency's Venus Express is orbiting Venus right now, and many NASA spacecraft, including Galileo and Cassini, have used the planet's gravitational pull to get to their destination. That's all for this month. I'm Jane Houston Jones.
The STS-126 astronauts flew into NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida on October 26th for their scheduled countdown rehearsal. The 7-member crew spent 3 days in exercises officially known as the Terminal Countdown Demonstration Test, or TCDT. The astronauts practiced emergency evacuation at the launch pad. They received instruction on driving the M113 armored personnel carrier as part of their emergency escape training. Commander Chris Ferguson and pilot Eric Bowe practiced landings in the shuttle training aircraft. The activities culminated in a launch dress rehearsal and practice countdown with the look and feel of a real launch day. With the exercises complete, the crew members flew back to their home base at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, where they will continue to train. Endeavour and crew are targeted for liftoff on November 14th. From the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, I'm George Diller.
The Youth Guidance Volunteer Program of Indian River County has been serving the at-risk youth population, ages 4 to 16, for over 32 years. We serve over 700 children each year, and we have touched over 20,000 young lives. The Youth Guidance Volunteer Program of Indian River County is a mentoring and activities program for at-risk kids in the community, ages 4 to 16. Our goal is to help level the playing field between these disadvantaged youth and their more advantaged peers. Our number one goal is to pair them each with their own mentor that they can do activities with one-on-one and show them things in life that they may not otherwise have a chance to experience.
Hello, my name is Michelle Dion, and I've been a youth guidance mentor since 1997. I'm now matched with a 10-year-old beautiful little girl by the name of Caitlin. We have been matched for 4 years now. Caitlin has been my inspiration in life. She and I have so much in common. The best thing I love about Caitlin is she's always there for me, and I will always be there for her.
I feel really special that Michelle picked me as her little sister because before I was kind of lonely and I had no one really to talk to.
My name is Mark Hornbuckle, and I'm a youth guidance mentor. I've been a mentor for several years. My kids are grown and they're both off in college, and having another young person in my life gives me the opportunity to do the things that I really like to do. It's very rewarding just to see the inspiration that a young kid has that you know would never be seeing the things you're showing him.
I feel very fortunate that Mark chose me out of all the other kids that he could have chosen, but we do have a lot of things that we have in common.
My name is Lynn. I have been a mentor for the past 3 years. I am a mentor to a girl named Indigo. We both like nature very much and appreciate taking care of nature, so we're into ecological things. So I think that youth guidance has not only been a wonderful experience for Indigo, it's been a fantastic experience for me.
Well, at first I didn't know her and I just said hi, but after the few weeks of meeting her and going places with her, I really like her and I want to have her forever. I think she's the best mentor ever.
If you just have a couple of hours a week to incorporate a child into your life, it can make a tremendous difference in the life of a child.
For more information about how you can be a special friend to a kid like me, just call the nice ladies at Youth Guidance at 770-5040 or check them on the web at ircyouth.com.
Far from the bustling cities that make Florida one of the nation's most urban states is an environment that allows for the renewal of both body and soul. Encompassing nearly 1 million acres, Florida's state forests provide visitors with unique back-to-nature experiences. Managed by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services Division of Forestry, Florida's more than 30 state forests strike a balance between the environment, resource management, and outdoor recreation.
The trees are in the sniper's hands.
Acting as stewards of these lands, the Division of Forestry protects and maintains the biological diversity of the many ecosystems found in and around the state forests. State forests such as Blackwater River, Withlacoochee, Jennings, Lake Wales Ridge, Gothey, and Pine Log exemplify the many public benefits that result from effective land management. Multiple-use land management is key to the success of the state forest system, and protecting the natural environment is the cornerstone. Florida State Forests provide protected habitat for many types of flora and fauna, including endangered or other species of concern, such as the red-cockaded woodpecker and gopher tortoise. Safeguarding this natural environment helps ensure the continuance of the state's distinctive and wondrous wildlife. Protecting this habitat is accomplished through careful use of sophisticated land management techniques. Prescribed burning, for instance, enhances the environment by simulating the natural growth cycle of the forest. Pioneered by early Native Americans, this technique not only improves wildlife habitat and forage, it reduces the negative impact of noxious, non-native plant species. It also controls underbrush that, if left unchecked, could fuel devastating wildfires. The general public has appreciated Florida's state forests for their abundance of outdoor recreational opportunities. More than 800,000 visitors experience the natural beauty of Florida's state forests each year.
The foresters are working to promote the longleaf pine. And
the natural splendor of Florida's state forests attracts naturalists from around the world who visit to experience the extraordinary environment and varied wildlife. Visitors can learn from a local expert during guided tours.
I saw Carolina chickadees here with the tufted titmouse.
Bird watchers flock to the forests in hope of adding to their life's list of sightings. A wealth of trails allows for nature watching, whether by foot, horseback, even mountain bike. Adventurer, young and old alike, can roam the forest with only a map and compass.
Remember, we line up the needle.
Whether pitching a tent in a primitive campsite or setting up in a full facility campground, camping is the perfect outlet for getting away from the hassle of urban life. These are just some of the activities ideally suited for the lush and tranquil setting that Florida's state forests provide. Many state forests also include archaeological and historical resources that are preserved for the future. Some of Florida's most beautiful rivers flow through the state forests. Canoeing down one of these pristine, meandering waterways is yet another way to experience Florida's state forests. Fishing and boating are also popular water activities. But a cool, refreshing dip is still the favorite way to escape the summer heat. All this is offered within a natural, idyllic setting unmatched by any theme park. The sheer size of Florida state forests itself is a marvel, providing not just solitude and enjoyment for visitors, but also renewable resources for society's use. The state forests contribute greatly to Florida's economy, serving as the foundation for an $8 billion a year industry. Ongoing restoration efforts help ensure that future generations will benefit from these renewable resources. Wholesome family recreation, wildlife habitat, managed renewable resources. These are just some of the benefits that state forests provide Floridians. Florida State Forests, striking a balance and enhancing our lives since 1936.
come any better than this. Wholesome, delicious, and nutritious food fresh from Florida.
And the safety of that food is important to everyone.
You put your trust in us to keep a watchful eye on everything we produce. That's why from planting to harvesting, we work hard to provide safe and healthy food for you and your family. Because we don't just grow the food,
We serve it to our families too.
Safe, affordable, and abundant. Food for thought from Florida's farmers.
Good health is important to everyone, and the best way to keep healthy is to eat right and be active. By eating fresh Florida fruits and vegetables and exercising daily, you'll be on track for a healthy lifestyle. So whatever your game, whether you're stepping up to the plate or heading into crunch time, taking it to the basket, or digging in, stay fit and eat right with fresh Florida fruits and vegetables. Good health, it's a game of inches. Who should you call with questions about auto repair shops, charities, checkout scanners, gas pumps, health clubs, intrastate movers, landlord-tenant disputes, price gouging, telemarketers, travel agencies? And that's just the start. Help in Florida is just a phone call away. 1-800-HELP-FLA.
Our call center is the state central office for handling all types of consumer complaints. Call us for help. I'm Florida Agriculture Commissioner Charles Bronson. Current conditions here in Florida have set the stage for an extremely dangerous wildfire season.
What's worse, about 1/4 of wildfires are set by arsonists. We need your help to stop this crime. Report suspicious activity by calling the Arson Alert Hotline. You can remain anonymous and possibly claim a reward. The best way to stop arsonists is to let them know you're watching.
Global warming is a problem.
Sound the alarm!
We think it's an important thing to save energy, to protect the environment, to protect the teacher.
Every who in Whoville makes a difference.
We need everyone!
Together, we can all make a difference.
Save energy with Energy Star, and then you can be
Our solution.
Go to EnergyStar.gov/kids to see what else you can do.
Other cars. He didn't watch out for my mother. She looked both ways. She was always careful. I should have stopped for her. Driving her always in a hurry.
Please, look for pedestrians. Stop for them. Think of the impact you can make.
What's up for October? This month we have a trick and a treat. One is in the morning sky and one is in the evening sky. Hello and welcome. I'm Jane Houston Jones at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. Early risers will be able to see a tricky target this month. It's Mercury. Mercury is just 1.5 times the size of our own moon, and it orbits the sun in 3 months. In early October, NASA's Messenger spacecraft flies past Mercury for the second time this year. And in 2011, Messenger will be the first spacecraft to actually orbit Mercury. Look in the eastern sky 30 minutes before the sun rises from the 16th of the month on. Mercury can be seen about 20 degrees above the horizon, and it will be easier to see towards the end of the month. With the unaided eye, Mercury looks like a star, and through a telescope, it'll look like a tiny version of the first quarter moon on the 16th, and like a tiny waxing gibbous moon on the 22nd. Halloween is a great time to look up in the night sky from your own neighborhoods. And this year we have more than one treat to offer. Both Venus and Jupiter are easy to see. the slender crescent moon joins the two planets a half hour after sunset. The European Space Agency's Venus Express is orbiting Venus right now, and many NASA spacecraft, including Galileo and Cassini, have used the planet's gravitational pull to get to their destination. That's all for this month. I'm Jane Houston Jones.
The STS-126 astronauts flew into NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida on October 26th for their scheduled countdown rehearsal. The 7-member crew spent 3 days in exercises officially known as the Terminal Countdown Demonstration Test, or TCDT. The astronauts practiced emergency evacuation at the launch pad. They received instruction on driving the M113 armored personnel carrier as part of their emergency escape training. Commander Chris Ferguson and pilot Eric Bowe practiced landings in the shuttle training aircraft. The activities culminated in a launch dress rehearsal and practice countdown with the look and feel of a real launch day. With the exercises complete, the crew members flew back to their home base at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, where they will continue to train. Endeavour and crew are targeted for liftoff on November 14th. From the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, I'm George Diller.